Brickell stands today as Miami's crown jewel, a glittering forest of luxury high-rises where fortunes are made and champagne flows freely. But beneath this glossy veneer lies an unsettling reality that few ever see. A world of invisible service workers who make this paradise function while struggling to survive on wages that can't sustain life in the very neighborhood they maintain. Have you ever wondered who really pays the price for all this luxury? The answer might be closer than you think, hidden in plain sight between the shadows of skyscrapers. Once upon a time, this land along Biscayne Bay was nothing more than swampland. Transformed in the early 20th century by pioneering investors William and Mary Brickell into what would become known as Millionaire's Row. They fiercely converted marshes into prime real estate, selling plots to wealthy buyers attracted to Miami's promise. Now, nearly a century later, those early mansions have been replaced by something far more imposing, a vertical city of glass and steel that has earned Brickell the nickname Manhattan of the South. Today's Brickell boasts an average household income of over $125,000, more than double the average for the city of Miami. Walk its immaculately maintained streets and you'll find world-class restaurants, luxury boutiques, and sleek office towers housing international banks and investment firms. The neighborhood has become the embodiment of a certain kind of American success story, a place where ambition meets opportunity, where the wealthy from Latin America, Europe, and across the United States come to plant their flags in condominium penthouses with panoramic ocean views. But wait until you see what happens when the sun sets and the financial district empties. That's when Brickell reveals its other face, when the service workers who power this economic engine begin their long journeys home, often traveling hours to reach affordable housing far from the community they serve. These are the doormen, housekeepers, dishwashers, line cooks, bartenders, and retail workers who make Brickell function but cannot afford to live within its boundaries. And the gap between them and the residents they serve grows wider with each new luxury development that breaks ground. Walk through Brickell on any weekday morning, and you'll witness this invisible workforce arriving before dawn. They emerge from buses and trains, some having traveled from neighborhoods as far as Hialeah, Liberty City, or even Homestead. By 6 a.m., they are already preparing the neighborhood for its daily performance of wealth and power. Polishing marble floors, pressing elevator buttons for executives, brewing coffee for bankers, and ensuring that not a single palm frond is out of place in this carefully curated paradise. Consider Maria, who cleans luxury condos in 3 different Brickell high-rises. She arrives each morning before dawn, having taken 2 buses from her apartment in Little Havana. The people whose homes I clean, she tells me, they have views worth millions, and I cannot even afford to buy coffee in the cafes downstairs. Her story isn't unique. It's the reality for thousands of workers who make up Brickell's invisible workforce. Maria earns $15 an hour, above Florida's minimum wage, but nowhere near the $24.77 that MIT's living wage calculator identifies as necessary for basic survival in Miami-Dade County. After paying rent on her 1-bedroom apartment, which consumes nearly 60% of her income, she has little left for food, utilities, transportation, and healthcare. Any unexpected expense, a medical bill, a car repair, threatens to unravel her precarious financial stability. "I am always one emergency away from homelessness," she says quietly, her eyes reflecting the towers where she spends her days cleaning homes she could never afford to enter as a resident. The numbers tell a stark story. While Brickell's average household income exceeds 6 figures, the minimum wage in Miami is just $14 per hour as of 2025. Even at this rate, a full-time minimum wage worker earns approximately $29,000 annually, not even close to what's needed to afford housing in Brickell, where studio apartments regularly rent for over $2,300 per month. The math simply doesn't add up for the people who make Brickell function day after day. This disparity creates a troubling dynamic, a community physically dependent on workers who are economically excluded from it. Every morning, thousands cross this invisible boundary into Brickell, providing essential services before returning at night to neighborhoods where housing costs align with their wages. It's a daily migration pattern as predictable as the tides, yet rarely acknowledged in conversations about Brickell's economic success. According to MIT's living wage calculator, a single adult in Miami-Dade County needs to earn around $24.77 per hour, nearly $11 above minimum wage, just to afford basic necessities like housing, food, transportation, and healthcare. For those with children, that figure climbs dramatically higher. But that's not even the most troubling part. The gap between what service workers earn and what they need becomes even more stark when you consider the rising cost of living in Miami. Housing prices have surged nearly 60% above the national average, while groceries and transportation costs continue to climb. For someone earning the minimum wage, even working full-time, affording a one-bedroom apartment in or near Brickell has become mathematically impossible without working multiple jobs or sharing housing with several others. Walk down Brickell Avenue and you'll notice something that residents talk about in hushed tones: the growing presence of homeless individuals in a neighborhood synonymous with extreme wealth. This juxtaposition becomes more jarring each year as luxury developments continue to replace affordable housing options, pushing more people to the economic margins. The contrast is so stark that it seems almost deliberately designed, a physical manifestation of economic inequality that forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about who benefits from urban development and who bears its costs. The story of Brickell's transformation reveals much about how urban development often proceeds in America, catering to the wealthy while displacing those with fewer resources. As recently as the 1970s, parts of Brickell still contained affordable apartment buildings and modest homes. But as the financial district expanded and luxury developers discovered the neighborhood's potential, these middle-class housing options gradually disappeared, replaced by high-end condominiums with amenities designed to attract wealthy investors and professionals. In a particularly stark contrast, new mixed-income housing developments like Magnus Brickell have recently opened, attempting to address the housing crisis. But even these efforts highlight the disparity. Out of 465 units in this 29-story tower, only 93 are reserved for households earning less than 50% of the area's median income. The rest remain out of reach for the average service worker. This token approach to affordable housing barely scratches the surface of what's needed to create a truly inclusive community. The economic divide in Brickell reflects broader trends across urban America, where service economies increasingly rely on workers who cannot afford to live in the very neighborhoods where they work. This spatial mismatch between jobs and affordable housing has profound consequences for both individual workers and the community as a whole. Long commutes not only strain personal budgets through transportation costs, but also extract a heavy toll on physical health, family relationships, and quality of life. Behind the gleaming facades of Brickell's luxury condominiums lies another troubling reality: the hidden public subsidy of low-wage employment. Because service workers in Brickell often can't survive on their wages alone, taxpayers end up subsidizing employers through public assistance programs like food stamps, subsidized healthcare, and housing assistance. This creates a system where profitable businesses effectively shift part of their labor costs onto the public, while their workers remain trapped in a cycle of poverty. Take, for example, David, who works full-time as a security guard at one of Brickell's most prestigious office towers. Despite providing essential services that keep the building secure for financial firms handling billions in assets, his $14 hourly wage qualifies his family for food assistance and Medicaid. "I work 40 hours a week in a building that generates millions in rent," he explains. "Yet my children need government help to eat and see a doctor. Something doesn't add up." The situation creates what economists call a spatial mismatch. Jobs are located in areas where workers cannot afford to live. This leads to long commutes, increased transportation costs, and less time with family. For Brickell service workers, this often means spending 3 to 4 hours daily on public transportation, further eroding their quality of life and economic mobility. Some report leaving home at 4 in the morning to arrive for 6 a.m. shifts, returning after 8 at night, effectively turning an 8-hour workday into a 14-hour commitment. This commuting burden has hidden costs beyond just time and money. Studies have linked long commutes to higher levels of stress, decreased physical health, reduced family engagement, and diminished community connections. For parents like Elena, who works as a housekeeper at a Brickell hotel, the commute means less time with her children. I leave before they wake up and get home after they're asleep, she says. I only see them awake on my days off. The emotional toll of this separation adds another layer of hardship to the economic challenges these workers already face. Lewis, who works as a server at one of Brickell's upscale restaurants, describes the bitter irony of his situation. I serve meals that cost more than what I make in 3 hours of work. I know every detail about these luxurious dishes, but I can barely afford to feed my own family. Each night, he prepares dining experiences for wealthy patrons before commuting nearly an hour to the small apartment he shares with 2 other restaurant workers in North Miami. The contrast between the worlds he inhabits, one of extreme luxury and one of economic precarity, creates a psychological burden that many service workers carry silently. This division between the served and the servers reflects a broader transformation happening across America's urban centers, the hollowing out of the middle class, and the growing divide between those who have benefited from the knowledge economy and those who support it from the shadows. In neighborhoods like Brickell, this divide is not just economic, but increasingly cultural, creating parallel communities that occupy the same physical space, yet rarely meaningfully interact. What makes Brickell's case particularly poignant is how visible yet invisible this divide has become. The physical proximity of extreme wealth and working poverty creates daily interactions that somehow manage to remain superficial. The banker in the tailored suit hands his car keys to the valet who lives paycheck to paycheck. The executive sips coffee prepared by a barista who skipped breakfast to make rent. The real estate developer discusses billion-dollar projects with associates while sitting at a table bussed by workers who will never be able to afford the properties they're building. These daily encounters could provide opportunities for mutual recognition and understanding, yet they often reinforce separation instead. Many service workers report feeling invisible to the residents and professionals they serve, their labor acknowledged only when something goes wrong. They don't see us as people with our own lives and struggles, explains Roberto, who has worked as a maintenance technician in various Brickell buildings for over a decade. We're just functions to them, the person who fixes the air conditioning or cleans the pool. This invisibility extends beyond individual interactions to policy decisions that shape Brickell's development. City planning meetings about new projects rarely include the voices of service workers, despite their essential role in the neighborhood's functioning. Luxury developments are approved with minimal affordable housing requirements, while public transportation improvements focus on connecting Brickell to other affluent areas, rather than to the neighborhoods where most workers live. The result is a built environment that physically encodes economic exclusion, making it increasingly difficult to bridge the growing divide. This invisible workforce becomes even more vulnerable during crises. When Hurricane Irma threatened Miami in 2017, many Brickell residents evacuated to second homes or luxury hotels in safer areas. Meanwhile, many service workers had nowhere to go, facing the storm in vulnerable housing far from the coastal neighborhood where they work. And when economic downturns hit, these workers have no financial cushion to absorb even temporary unemployment. The COVID-19 pandemic laid bare these disparities with brutal clarity. While many Brickell professionals could retreat to the safety of their homes and work remotely, service workers faced an impossible choice: continue working in person, risking exposure to the virus, or lose their income entirely. Many luxury buildings actually increased their cleaning protocols during the pandemic, requiring maintenance and housekeeping staff to work more intensively even as residents minimized their own exposure by staying home. Carlos, who has worked as a janitor in a Brickell office building for 15 years, says the pandemic revealed these disparities more clearly than ever. When COVID came, the professionals worked from their homes with ocean views. We had to keep coming in every day to clean, to keep things running, risking our health because we couldn't afford to miss a paycheck. The economic impact of the pandemic hit service workers particularly hard. As restaurants closed or reduced capacity, as hotels emptied of guests, as office buildings stood vacant, many found themselves suddenly without income. Without substantial savings, impossible to accumulate on service industry wages, many faced immediate financial crisis. Food banks across Miami reported unprecedented demand, while eviction filings spiked once temporary moratoriums lifted. The fragility of life on service wages, always present but often hidden, became impossible to ignore. Yet even as the pandemic exposed these vulnerabilities, it also accelerated trends that may further widen Brickell's economic divide. Remote work has allowed high-earning professionals from more expensive cities like New York and San Francisco to relocate to Miami, bringing their coastal salaries to a housing market already struggling with affordability. This influx of wealthy residents has driven property values and rents even higher, further displacing service workers to increasingly distant neighborhoods. The pandemic also accelerated another trend affecting Brickell, the influx of tech companies and financial firms relocating from New York and California, bringing highly paid workers who further drive up housing costs. This migration has been celebrated by business leaders and politicians as evidence of Miami's growing importance as a financial center, but it has intensified the housing crisis for local workers. Major financial institutions like Blackstone, Goldman Sachs, and Citadel have expanded their Miami footprint, while tech companies attracted by Florida's tax advantages have established growing presences. Mayor Francis Suarez actively courted these businesses with promises of business-friendly policies and quality-of-life advantages.
What received less attention in these discussions was how the arrival of thousands of six-figure jobs might impact those already struggling with Miami's housing costs. Walk through Brickell today and you'll see the physical manifestations of this influx. New luxury residential towers with names like Baccarat Residences, Cipriani Residences, and the Residences at Mandarin Oriental. These developments feature amenities that would seem excessive even in the most exclusive resorts. Private marina access, rooftop helicopter pads, automated parking systems for luxury vehicles, resident-only spas and restaurants. Units sell for millions, sometimes tens of millions, creating vertical enclaves of wealth disconnected from the surrounding community. Meanwhile, the workers who will maintain these buildings, prepare food in their restaurants, clean their common areas, and provide security at their entrances continue to be priced further away from their places of employment. The economic logic seems increasingly unsustainable. How can a neighborhood function when those who provide its essential services cannot afford to live within a reasonable distance? One initiative attempting to address this disparity is Miami-Dade County's Living Wage Ordinance, which requires county service contractors to pay workers a wage that keeps them above the poverty line. But this regulation applies only to county contracts, leaving most private employers free to pay minimum wage, a rate that has consistently fallen short of what's needed to live with dignity in Miami's expensive housing market. Some developers have begun including affordable housing components in their projects, either voluntarily or due to zoning incentives. But these efforts remain modest compared to the scale of the problem. A typical affordable unit in a new Brickell development might be accessible to a household earning 80% of the area median income, still far above what most service workers earn. True low-income housing remains scarce, and waiting lists for subsidized options can stretch for years. Community organizations like Camilla's House have stepped in to address the growing homelessness crisis, providing shelter and support services across Miami-Dade County. Their work reveals the human cost of Brickell's economic contradictions. People working full-time jobs who still cannot afford stable housing, forced to choose between paying rent and buying food or medicine. The organization reports serving over 33,000 individuals and families each year, with demand continuing to grow despite Miami's economic boom. Local advocates have proposed various solutions to bridge Brickell's economic divide.
These include stronger inclusionary zoning requirements that would mandate meaningful percentages of affordable units in new developments, improved public transportation connecting Brickell to more affordable neighborhoods, community benefit agreements ensuring that new developments create good jobs with living wages, and expanded workforce housing programs specifically targeting service industry employees. Yet progress remains slow, hampered by powerful development interests and a political environment that often prioritizes growth over equity. Miami's status as a city largely built on real estate development creates structural challenges to implementing policies that might limit profitability, even when those policies would benefit thousands of working residents. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Brickell's economic divide is how thoroughly normalized it has become. Residents become accustomed to the presence of luxury alongside poverty. Tourists marvel at the architectural wonders without seeing the economic foundations they rest upon. Even city planning often focuses on attracting more investment and development rather than ensuring those who make it all possible can share in its benefits. This normalization affects even how we imagine urban success. Brickell is routinely celebrated in business publications and travel magazines as a symbol of Miami's ascendance. Its gleaming towers and luxury amenities held up as evidence of economic vitality. Rarely do these accounts mention the workers who make this lifestyle possible, or question whether prosperity concentrated among so few constitutes true urban success. Some residents have begun to recognize these contradictions and advocate for change.
Community organizations like Miami Workers Center and SMAS, Service Workers Assembly of South Florida, have organized to demand better wages and working conditions, while housing advocates press for stronger affordability requirements in new developments. These efforts represent early attempts to reimagine Brickell's future as a more inclusive community rather than an exclusive enclave. As night falls over Brickell, the contrast becomes even more pronounced. The condominiums light up floor by floor, creating a spectacular skyline celebrated in countless Instagram posts and tourism brochures. Below, service workers wait at bus stops, beginning long journeys home to neighborhoods far from the wealth they help create each day. The buses that arrive are often crowded and delayed. Miami's public transportation system struggles to serve the dispersed communities where service workers increasingly live. Some will transfer multiple times before reaching home, a journey that can stretch to 2 hours in each direction. Others, unable to afford even distant housing on their wages, have moved in with relatives or crowd into shared apartments, sometimes with multiple families sharing a single unit meant for one. Follow these workers home and you'll discover the other half of Brickell's story, the neighborhoods where economic pressure has pushed those who cannot afford to live where they work. In areas like Alapata, Little Haiti, and parts of Homestead, housing costs have also risen due to gentrification and development pressure, but they remain the only options for many service workers. Even here, many spend well over the recommended 30% of income on housing, leaving little for other necessities. What does this tale of two cities within a single neighborhood tell us about the American dream? Is prosperity truly possible when it depends on the labor of people who cannot afford to participate in the very economy they sustain? These questions echo through Brickell's concrete canyons, largely unheard amid the buzz of commerce and consumption. Sarah, who works at the front desk of a luxury residential building, perhaps sums it up best. Everyone talks about Brickell as Miami's success story, but whose success are we really talking about? I've worked here for 7 years, and I'm still living with roommates, still struggling. It feels like this place wasn't built for people like me to succeed, just to serve. The story of Brickell is ultimately a story about visibility and invisibility, about what we choose to see and what remains hidden despite being right before our eyes. The gleaming towers reach skyward in a physical manifestation of aspiration and achievement, while the economic foundation supporting them remains precarious for those who make it all possible.
As new developments continue to transform Brickell's skyline, projects with names like Brickell City Center, 1000 Museum, and Echo Brickell, questions about who benefits from this prosperity become increasingly urgent. Each new luxury tower creates both opportunity and exclusion. Jobs for construction workers, maintenance staff, and service providers, yet housing that remains inaccessible to these same workers. Some developers and city officials argue that luxury development generates economic benefits that eventually trickle down to all residents, creating jobs, increasing the tax base, and enhancing Miami's global prestige. Critics counter that without intentional policies to ensure inclusivity, this model of development primarily benefits those already advantaged while further marginalizing vulnerable communities. Both perspectives contain elements of truth, but the lived experience of Brickell's service workers suggests that the benefits of development are not being equitably shared. The philosophical questions raised by Brickell's economic divide extend beyond this single neighborhood to challenge our understanding of what makes a successful city. Is it enough to create prosperity for some, or should urban development aim to foster communities where all residents can thrive? Can luxury and affordability coexist, or does one inevitably displace the other? What responsibilities do employers have to ensure their workers can afford to live with dignity in the communities they serve? As Miami continues to grow and transform, the question remains whether development can become more inclusive, whether prosperity can be shared more equitably among all who contribute to it. For now, Brickell stands as both promise and warning, a testament to human ingenuity and wealth creation, but also a reminder of what happens when we build economic systems that serve the few while depending on the many. The future of Brickell, and of Miami more broadly, will depend on how these questions are answered, on whether policymakers, developers, businesses, and residents can imagine and create a more inclusive vision of urban prosperity. This would require not just token affordable housing units, but a fundamental rethinking of how development proceeds and who it serves. It would mean valuing essential workers enough to ensure they can afford to live in the communities where they work, with wages that reflect their critical contributions. Some promising models exist in other cities facing similar challenges. Community benefits agreements that require developers to provide meaningful, affordable housing and good jobs in exchange for approval to build.
Worker cooperatives that allow service employees to share in the prosperity they help create. Public-private partnerships that leverage development profits to fund truly affordable housing and improved public services. These approaches suggest that alternatives to exclusionary development are possible, but they require political will and collective action to implement. Night falls completely now. The financial district has emptied of its daytime occupants. In their place, a different Brickell emerges. The Brickell of maintenance workers, cleaning crews, and security guards who keep the machinery of luxury running through the night. They move through marble lobbies and along manicured pathways, tending to spaces many can only dream of calling home. Empty tables, empty streets, empty dreams. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again. The invisible workforce will return before dawn, preparing the stage for another day of commerce and luxury. The bankers and lawyers will arrive in their luxury cars, perhaps nodding hello to the parking attendants without knowing their names or stories. Life in Brickell will continue its parallel tracks, visible prosperity alongside invisible struggle. Yet within this pattern lies the possibility of change. Every day that exposes these contradictions creates opportunities for awareness and action. Every conversation about Brickell's future is a chance to imagine a more inclusive vision of urban development. Every policy decision is a choice about whose interests will be prioritized and whose needs will be addressed. Maybe there's still hope for a different kind of urban development, one that values all contributions and ensures everyone can share in the prosperity they help create. A city glowing not just with the light of wealth, but with the more enduring illumination of genuine community and shared opportunity. We've seen what happens when we forget this fundamental balance. It's time we remember what cities were always meant to be. Places where diverse people come together not just to work, but to thrive. If you felt this disconnect too, share your story in the comments. And if you found this eye-opening, subscribe. The next story might reveal where everyone's going next.